Princess Valara sat in the dark corner of the transport ship, her wrists bound in heavy metal chains. The cold metal pressed against her blue skin, a constant reminder of how far she had fallen. Once she had worn golden jewelry and silk robes. Now she wore prison clothes and carried the shame of her entire family. The transport ship shook as it entered the atmosphere of Tarthos 9. Valara closed her eyes and tried not to think about her home planet. She tried not to remember the trial where her own mother had looked away. She tried to forget her father's cold words. A princess without telepathy is no princess at all. The Kael'thar people were known across the galaxy for their powerful minds. They could speak to each other without words, could sense emotions, could even push thoughts into the minds of others. Every member of the royal family possessed these gifts. Every member except Valara. She had been born different. Broken, they called her. Defective. For 20 years, she had tried to prove her worth in other ways. She studied harder than anyone. She learned 6 languages. She trained in combat until her body ached, but none of it mattered. Without telepathy, she was nothing to them. The Imperial Court had voted on her fate. The decision was unanimous. Exile to Tarthos 9, a mining colony at the edge of known space, a place where the Empire sent criminals and those they wanted to forget. Valara would be forgotten there, her father had said. The royal bloodline would be pure again. The transport ship landed with a heavy thud. Guards opened the doors and pulled the prisoners out one by one. When they reached Valara, they showed no respect for her former title. One guard grabbed her arm roughly and pushed her forward. "Move it, princess," he said with a nasty laugh. "Your palace awaits." Tarthos 9 was nothing like the beautiful cities of her homeworld. The settlement was a collection of metal buildings and dirt streets. The sky was a dull gray color. The air smelled of chemicals and sweat. Hundreds of alien species walked the streets, all of them prisoners or exiles like her. The guards removed Valara's chains and pushed her into the main yard. Then they left without a word. She stood alone, feeling the eyes of dozens of creatures watching her. She straightened her back and lifted her chin. She might be exiled, but she was still a princess. She would not show fear. But fear found her anyway. 6 large aliens approached her from different directions. They were Vraxians, a species known for their strength and violent nature. Their leader was a massive creature with gray scales and sharp teeth. He smiled at Valara, and it was not a friendly smile. "Look what we have here," he said in the common galactic language. "A pretty little Kael'thar all alone. Do you know the rules here, pretty one? The strong take what they want, and you look very weak." Valara reached for her training. She took a fighting stance, feet apart, hands ready. The Vraxians laughed. They spread out around her, blocking any escape. Her royal combat training had been excellent, but she was 1 against 6. She was smaller, lighter, and without telepathic powers to confuse or stop them. "I am Princess Valara of the Kael'thar Empire," she said, trying to sound brave. "Touch me and face consequences." The leader laughed harder. "Princess? Here? There are no princesses in Tarthos 9, only the strong and the weak." They moved closer. Valara prepared to fight, knowing she would lose. At least she would go down with honor. At least she would not beg. Then a voice cut through the tension. A human voice. "That's far enough." Everyone turned. A human male walked toward them through the crowd. He was tall for his species, but still shorter than the Vraxians. He had brown hair, dark eyes, and several old scars on his face and arms. His prison clothes were worn but clean. He looked tired but not afraid. The Vraxian leader laughed again. "A human! You dare interfere? Humans are weak creatures, new to the galaxy. You have no strength, no power, no speed. Walk away before we break you." The human stopped a few feet away. He looked at Valara, then at the Vraxians. When he spoke, his voice was calm and steady. 6 against 1 isn't a fight. It's cowardice. Let her go. Or what, human? Or I make you. What happened next shocked everyone in the yard. The Vraxian leader attacked first, moving with the speed his species was famous for. But the human was faster. He stepped to the side, grabbed the Vraxian's arm, and used the creature's own momentum to throw him to the ground. The impact was loud. The other 5 Vraxians attacked together. The human became a blur of motion. He dodged, struck, moved, and countered with a skill that seemed impossible. He hit pressure points. He used leverage instead of strength. He turned their power against them. When one Vraxian tried to grab him, he twisted away and kicked the creature's leg, making him fall. When another swung a heavy fist, he ducked and punched the alien's throat, making him choke and stumble back. In less than 3 minutes, all 6 Vraxians were on the ground, groaning in pain. The human stood over them, breathing hard but still standing. Blood dripped from a cut on his cheek, but he was smiling. "Anyone else?" he asked the watching crowd. No one moved. No one spoke. Slowly, the crowd began to back away. The Vraxians picked themselves up and retreated quickly, not looking back. The human turned to Valara and extended his hand. "You okay?" Valara stared at him, unable to understand what had just happened. "Why? Why did you help me? You don't even know who I am." The human shrugged. "Where I come from, we don't let people get jumped 6 against 1. Doesn't matter who they are." He smiled. "Name's Jake Morrison. Welcome to Tarthos 9. Valara took his hand. His grip was warm and strong. For the first time since her trial, since her exile, since her family had abandoned her, Valara felt something unexpected, something precious. Hope. Jake led Valara through the narrow streets of the prison colony. She stayed close behind him, still shocked by what she had witnessed. The human had defeated 6 Vraxians with his bare hands. It should have been impossible. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe," Jake replied. "Or as safe as anywhere gets in this place." They walked for 10 minutes through the metal corridors. Valara saw hundreds of different alien species. Some worked in the mines. Others traded goods in makeshift markets. Many just sat against walls, their eyes empty and hopeless. This was a place where dreams came to die. Jake stopped at a large building made of old ship parts and scrap metal. "Home sweet home," he said. "The barracks. We share space with about 200 others, but I've got a corner claimed with some friends. They're good people. You'll be safe there." Inside, the barracks were crowded and noisy. Aliens of every type filled the space. Jake guided Valara to a corner where several creatures sat around a small fire made in a metal barrel. They looked up as Jake approached. "Everyone, this is Valara," Jake said. "She's new here, needs a safe place to stay." An elderly alien with 4 arms and gray skin stood up slowly. "Another lost soul for our collection," he said in a kind voice. "I am Torvin, once an engineer. Now just an old fool." A young alien with green scales and gentle eyes nodded at Valara. "I'm Syra. I was a medic before they sent me here." She pointed to 2 identical aliens with orange fur. "Those are Cricks and Cracks. They don't talk much, but they're excellent scavengers." Valara looked at each of them, then at Jake. "Why are you all here? What crimes did you commit?" Torvin laughed bitterly. "Crime? I designed ships that were too efficient, made my employers less money, so they found an excuse to send me here." Syra touched a scar on her neck. "I tried to help people my government said were enemies. They called it treason." Jake sat down by the fire. "Most people here aren't criminals. We're just inconvenient to someone powerful. Welcome to Tarthos 9, where the unwanted disappear." Over the next few weeks, Valara learned the harsh truth about the colony. It was controlled by an organization called the Syndicate. They ran the mining operations and kept everyone in line through fear and violence. The strongest aliens worked as enforcers. The weakest worked in the mines until they died. There was no law here except the law of power. But Valara also learned something else. She learned about humans. She watched Jake every day. He woke before everyone else and exercised for 2 hours. Push-ups, running in place, combat practice against imaginary opponents. His body was not naturally strong like a Vraxian, or fast like a Thessian. But he never stopped training, never stopped pushing himself to be better. "Why do you work so hard?" Valara asked him one morning. Jake paused his exercises, breathing heavily. "Because humans don't have natural advantages. We're not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest species in the galaxy, so we have to work harder. We have to be more prepared. We adapt or we die." Valara began to understand. Humans were survivors. They learned from everything and everyone. Jake studied the other species in the colony, memorizing their fighting styles, their weaknesses, their strengths. He made friends with aliens from a dozen different worlds, learning their languages and cultures. He never stopped learning, never stopped adapting. Then, one evening, everything changed. A massive alien walked into their section of the barracks. He was twice Jake's size, with thick armor-like skin and cold eyes. Behind him came 6 enforcers, all armed with weapons. The entire barracks went silent. "I am Drokath," the alien announced. "Lieutenant of the Syndicate. I want to speak with the human called Jake Morrison." Jake stood slowly. "I'm Jake. What do you want?" Drokath smiled, showing sharp teeth. "You interfered with Syndicate business. Those Vraxians you defeated work for us. You embarrassed them. You embarrassed us." They were attacking an innocent person, 6 against 1. "There are no innocent people here," Drokath said. "And there is only one rule. The Syndicate controls everything. You will submit to our authority, human, or there will be consequences." Jake's expression hardened. "I don't submit to bullies." Drokath's smile disappeared. "Then I give you a choice. The Syndicate runs gladiator fights in the arena for entertainment. You will fight there. If you refuse, everyone in your little group dies. Starting with your new Kael'thar friend." Valara felt ice in her stomach. She started to speak, but Jake raised his hand. "I'll fight," Jake said quietly. "Excellent," Drokath replied. "Your first match is tomorrow night. Try to survive. It makes for better entertainment." He turned and left with his enforcers. After they were gone, Valara grabbed Jake's arm. "You can't do this! Arena fights are to the death! They'll put you against their champions!" "I know." "Then why did you agree?" Jake looked at her, and she saw no fear in his eyes, only determination. "Because the alternative is watching good people die. I won't let that happen." That night, Valara couldn't sleep. She found Jake sitting alone near a broken window, looking up at the 2 moons of Tarthos 9. She sat beside him quietly. "Thank you," she said, "for protecting me again. But I'm sorry I brought this trouble to you." Jake shook his head. "You didn't bring trouble. Trouble was already here. The Syndicate would have found an excuse eventually." He paused. "Can I tell you something? Back on Earth, I was a Marine. I protected a farming colony from a corporation that wanted their land. The corporation hired mercenaries to force them out. We fought back and won. But the corporation had money and lawyers. They called us terrorists. That's why I'm here." "That's not justice," Valara said. "No, it's not. I learned something from that experience. The system isn't built for justice. The system is built for power. So sometimes, good people have to stand up and become justice themselves." The next night, the entire colony gathered around the arena. Valara stood with Torvin and the others, her heart pounding with fear. The arena was a circle of dirt surrounded by metal walls. Lights hung overhead, casting harsh shadows. Jake entered from one side. From the other side came his opponent, a Vraxian champion twice his size, covered in scars from previous victories. The fight began. It was brutal. The Vraxian was strong and experienced. He hit Jake hard, sending him crashing to the ground. Blood appeared on Jake's face. The crowd roared, but Jake stood up. He always stood up. Valara watched in amazement as Jake fought not with strength, but with intelligence. He dodged when he could, absorbed hits when he had to, and struck back at weak points. He made the Vraxian chase him, tire himself out, waste energy on missed attacks. 20 minutes into the fight, the Vraxian was breathing hard. Jake was bleeding and bruised, but his eyes were still sharp and focused. The Vraxian charged one final time, going for a killing blow. Jake waited until the last possible second, then stepped aside. He used the Vraxian's own momentum against him, guiding him straight into the arena wall. The impact was thunderous. The Vraxian collapsed and didn't get up. The crowd went silent. Then slowly they began to cheer. Jake limped toward the exit, barely able to walk. Syra rushed to help him, supporting his weight. As they passed Valara, Jake looked at her and smiled despite his pain. Valara made a decision in that moment. She followed them to the medical area where Syra treated Jake's wounds. When Syra finished, Valara knelt beside Jake's bed. "Teach me," she said firmly. Jake looked at her with surprise. "Teach you what?" "Teach me to fight like you do." "Teach me to be strong." Jake studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "It won't be easy. You'll hurt. You'll want to quit. But if you're serious, I'll teach you everything I know." Valara met his eyes without fear. "I'm tired of being helpless. I'm tired of being weak. My people rejected me for what I lack. Now I want to become strong through what I have." Jake smiled and extended his hand. "Then tomorrow we start training. Welcome to the human way, Valara. We never give up." As Valara shook his hand, she felt that strange feeling again. Hope, and something else. Purpose. The arena was a circle of blood and sand. Valara moved like water, flowing around Drokath's attacks. The massive enforcer swung his fists like hammers, but each blow hit only air. The crowd watched in stunned silence. "Stand still and fight!" Drokath roared in frustration. Valara didn't respond. She focused on Jake's teachings. Don't waste energy on words. Save everything for the fight. Watch the opponent's feet, their shoulders, their eyes. Predict the next move before it happens. Drokath charged again. This time, Valara didn't just dodge. As he passed, she struck his knee joint with a precise kick. The big alien stumbled. It wasn't enough to bring him down, but it planted a seed of doubt. For 10 minutes, Valara danced and struck. Small hits to weak points, a punch to the ribs, a strike to the elbow, a kick to the back of the knee. Each attack was calculated, designed to wear him down slowly. The crowd began to murmur. This wasn't the quick execution they expected. The weak princess was fighting smart, using human tactics against superior strength. Drokath was breathing hard now. Sweat covered his face. His movements became slower, sloppier. Rage replaced strategy. He swung wildly, trying to catch Valara with pure power, but rage made him predictable. Valara saw her opening. As Drokath swung another heavy punch, she dropped low, swept his legs, and used his momentum to send him crashing into the arena wall. The impact echoed like thunder. Drokath fell to his knees, dazed. Valara stood over him, her fist raised for the finishing blow. The crowd held its breath. Then she lowered her hand. "Yield," she said. "I don't need to kill you to win." Drokath looked up at her with shock and hatred, but he had no strength left to continue. Slowly, he nodded. "I yield." The arena erupted in chaos. Some cheered, others shouted in disbelief. The impossible had happened. A rejected princess had defeated the Syndicate's champion. But Valara didn't celebrate. She turned toward the stands, searching for Jake. She found him near the entrance, giving her a quick nod. The signal, the distraction had worked. Now she had to keep all eyes on the arena. Meanwhile, on the other side of the colony, Jake led a team to the landing bay. The prison transport had just arrived. Guards stood watch, but most of the Syndicate's forces were at the arena, watching the fight. Jake's team moved quickly and quietly. Syra used her medical knowledge to create a sleeping gas that knocked out the remaining guards. The Therian mechanic disabled the alarm systems. The Belkari hacker accessed the transport's cargo hold. Inside were weapons, real weapons, not improvised tools, energy rifles, body armor, communication devices, and most importantly, a long-range transmitter that could punch through the colony's jamming field. "Load everything," Jake ordered. "We have maybe 10 minutes before they realize what's happening." His team worked fast, moving equipment to hidden locations throughout the colony. But then complications arose. A patrol of enforcers appeared, returning early from perimeter duty. They saw the open transport and raised the alarm. Gunfire erupted. Jake's team fought back, using their newly acquired weapons. The battle was fierce and loud. Several of Jake's people were wounded, but they held their ground. They couldn't let the Syndicate retake the weapons. Back in the arena, Valara heard the distant sound of gunfire. Her heart raced. The plan was working, but now came the dangerous part. She had to keep the crowd's attention. Keep the Syndicate leadership focused on her. She raised her voice, addressing everyone in the stands. "By the ancient right of combat, I have won. The Syndicate must honor the agreement. My people will have autonomy. No more oppression, no more arbitrary executions." The Syndicate's second-in-command, a snake-like alien named Vesic, stood up in the VIP section. "The agreement was with Drokath. He no longer speaks for the Syndicate. We reject your claim." The crowd erupted in angry shouts. Even prisoners who feared the Syndicate were outraged. The sacred right of combat had been respected across the galaxy for thousands of years. To reject it was to lose all honor. Valara climbed onto the arena wall to be seen by everyone. "Then the Syndicate has no honor. You rule through fear and lies, but we are not afraid anymore." At that moment, Jake and his team burst into the arena, armed and armored. Behind them came hundreds of prisoners, all carrying improvised weapons and captured Syndicate equipment. The resistance had revealed itself fully. Jake reached Valara's side, breathing hard from the battle. "We got everything," he said quietly. "And we sent the signal. Help is coming." Vesic's face twisted with rage. "Kill them! Kill them all!" But the Syndicate's enforcers hesitated. They were outnumbered now. The prisoners who had lived in fear for years were standing together, armed and ready to fight. The balance of power had shifted. "Retreat to the command center," Vesic ordered. The Syndicate's forces withdrew, barricading themselves in the fortified central building. The arena erupted in cheers. Prisoners celebrated their first real victory against their oppressors. But Jake and Valara knew this was just the beginning. That night, as the colony organized its defense, Jake checked the communication equipment. His expression grew serious as he read the incoming messages. "What's wrong?" Valara asked. Jake looked up at her. "I have good news and bad news. The good news, my signal reached friendly space. A ship is responding. The bad news, the Syndicate also sent a distress call. Their warship is coming." "How long do we have?" 2 days, maybe less." Jake pulled up a star map. "If the Syndicate's ship arrives first, they'll have orbital superiority. They can bombard us from space. If our allies arrive first, we have a chance." Valara felt the weight of responsibility. Hundreds of people had followed her and Jake into this rebellion. Now their lives depended on a race against time. "Then we need to be ready for anything," she said. "We've come too far to give up now." Jake nodded. "Agreed. We need to fortify our positions, set up defenses, and prepare for a siege if necessary." He paused, looking out at the colony where former prisoners were now working together, building barricades and organizing supply lines. "You know what amazes me?" Jake said. A few months ago, these people had no hope. They were broken. Now look at them, fighting together. Different species, different worlds, but united. Valara smiled. That's the human way, isn't it? Never accepting defeat, always finding hope in impossible situations. Something like that, Jake agreed. Suddenly, alarms blared across the colony. A lookout was shouting and pointing at the sky. Everyone looked up. A massive ship was descending through the atmosphere. Its hull bore markings that made Valara's breath catch in her throat. It was a Kael'thar Imperial vessel. Jake grabbed his weapon. Is that the Syndicate's ship? No, Valara whispered, her mind racing. That's my people. The Empire has come to Tarthos 9. The question was, had they come to help or to finish what her exile had started? The ship landed near the colony's main square. A ramp extended, and a figure emerged wearing royal armor. Valara recognized him immediately. It was her younger brother, Prince Sorin. Their eyes met across the distance. Valara stood tall, no longer the rejected princess who had arrived in chains. She was a warrior now, a leader who had helped spark a revolution. Sorin approached slowly, his guards flanking him. When he was close enough, he spoke. Hello, sister. We need to talk. 3 months passed like a storm of pain and growth. Every morning before the sun rose, Valara trained with Jake. Her body ached in ways she had never experienced. Her muscles burned. Her hands became covered in calluses. But she never complained. She never asked to stop. Jake taught her everything he knew, not just how to fight, but how to think like a human warrior. Fighting isn't about being the strongest, he told her during one training session. It's about being the smartest. Use your opponent's strength against them. Find their weakness. Adapt to every situation. Valara learned quickly. Her Kael'thar body had natural coordination and balance. Combined with human tactical thinking, she became formidable. She learned to read body language, to predict movements, to strike at joints and pressure points. She learned that victory came from the mind as much as the body. Jake continued fighting in the arena every week. He won every match, though each fight left him more scarred. With his winnings, he bought better food for their group, medical supplies, and small tools. But Valara noticed he was doing something else too. He was making friends, building connections with other prisoners from different groups. Why do you spend so much time talking to people? Valara asked him one day. Jake smiled. Because change doesn't come from one person, it comes from many people working together. I'm planting seeds, Valara, seeds of hope. Those seeds began to grow. More prisoners approached Jake and Valara, asking to join their group. A Therian mechanic who could fix anything. A Belkari hacker who could break into computer systems. A Morphian cook who could make food from almost nothing. Slowly, carefully, a resistance began to form. They started small, sabotaging syndicate equipment so it broke down, stealing extra food supplies and sharing them with the weak and sick, protecting vulnerable prisoners from enforcers. Jake taught them tactics from Earth's history, ways for small groups to fight against larger powers. The resistance grew to 50 members, then 100, then more. But success brought danger. One night, Drokath and his enforcers raided the barracks. They came with weapons and fury. They arrested dozens of prisoners, including Torvin, the kind old engineer who had welcomed Valara on her first day. The next morning, Drokath gathered everyone in the main square. He dragged Torvin to the center, forcing him to his knees. This is what happens to those who defy the Syndicate, Drokath announced. His voice echoed across the silent crowd. This old fool was building communication equipment, planning to contact the outside galaxy. Such actions cannot be tolerated. Valara's blood turned to ice. She looked at Jake, who stood rigid with anger. But there were too many enforcers, all armed. Any rescue attempt would end in massacre. Drokath executed Torvin in front of everyone. The old engineer's last words were, "Never stop hoping." The crowd dispersed in fear and silence. Drokath's message was clear. resist, and die. Back in the barracks, the mood was dark. Many members of the resistance were terrified. They talked about giving up, about just trying to survive. Valara listened to their fear and felt something break inside her. Not her spirit, but her last connection to her old life. She was no longer a rejected princess. She was someone who had learned to fight, someone who had found purpose. She stood up and walked to the center of their gathering. Everyone fell silent. "I want to tell you about my homeworld," Valara began. Her voice was steady and strong. "I was born a princess. I had everything except the one thing my people valued most, telepathy. They judged me worthless because I was different, and I believed them. I accepted their judgment. I accepted that I was broken." She looked around at all the faces watching her, different species, different worlds, but all of them exiles and prisoners. "Then I came here and met a human who showed me a different truth. He showed me that worth isn't given by others. It's claimed by yourself. Every day he chooses to stand up. Every day he chooses to fight for something better, and he taught me to do the same." Valara's eyes blazed with determination. "Torvin died today, but he died hoping for something better. We can honor his memory by giving up, by surviving on our knees, or we can honor him by standing up and fighting for the freedom he dreamed of." The crowd stirred. Some looked inspired. Others still looked afraid. Jake stepped forward to stand beside Valara. "I have a plan," he said. "In 2 days, a prison transport arrives with new prisoners. I've made contact with sympathizers on the outside. They're smuggling weapons and communication equipment on that transport. Real equipment that can reach beyond this colony's jamming systems." He paused, letting that information sink in. "But we need a distraction. Something big enough to pull all Syndicate attention away from the landing bay when the transport arrives." Valara knew what had to be done. "I'll challenge Drokath to arena combat," she said. "There's an ancient right of honor that even the Syndicate must respect. If I invoke it, they have to accept. One fighter against another, with stakes agreed upon beforehand." Jake looked at her with concern. "Valara, Drokath has killed hundreds in that arena. He's massive, experienced, and brutal." "I know," Valara replied, "but you've taught me well. And I'm not fighting to win for myself. I'm fighting for all of us." She turned to the gathered resistance. "If I win, the Syndicate must grant our group autonomy. If I lose, we disband. But either way, it will create the distraction you need." Syra, the medic, stepped forward. "This is madness. You've only been training for 3 months. 3 months with the best teacher in the galaxy," Valara said, smiling at Jake. 3 months learning the human way, adapt, persist, overcome. Jake studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. "If you're going to do this, we train harder than ever before. Every hour we have left." The next 2 days were intense. Jake taught Valara everything about fighting larger opponents. How to use speed against strength. How to conserve energy while making the opponent waste theirs. How to target weak points. How to survive. The entire colony heard about the challenge. When the arena day arrived, every prisoner gathered to watch. The stands were packed with aliens from 100 different worlds. They came to see if a rejected princess could stand against the Syndicate's most feared enforcer. Valara stood in the preparation room, focusing on her breathing like Jake taught her. She wore simple combat clothing and light armor. Across the arena, she could see Drokath preparing. He was a mountain of muscle and rage, his armor covered in the marks of countless victories. Jake entered the room. "It's time," he said. Then he placed his hand on her shoulder. "Remember, he's stronger, but you're smarter. He's experienced, but you're unpredictable. Make him fight your fight, not his." "I remember everything you taught me," Valara said. "I know you do." Jake smiled. "You've become an amazing fighter, Valara. But more than that, You've become a leader. Whatever happens in that arena, know that you've already won. You've given people hope. The arena doors opened. The crowd's roar washed over Valara like a wave. She walked into the circle of dirt and lights, her head high, her heart steady. Across from her, Drokath entered. He looked at her with contempt. A princess playing warrior. This will be quick. Valara took her fighting stance. She thought of Torvin's sacrifice. She thought of Jake's lessons. She thought of everyone counting on her. The bell rang. Drokath charged like a bull, expecting to crush her immediately, but Valara was already moving, dancing to the side, making him chase empty air. The real fight had begun, and the colony held its breath. Setup. 3 months pass. Valara trains under Jake's guidance, learning not just combat but human philosophy, persistence, creative thinking, and the refusal to accept impossible odds. She discovers that while she lacks telepathy, her people's enhanced physical coordination combined with human tactical thinking makes her formidable. Jake continues winning in the arena, earning credits and favors that he uses to improve conditions for the outcasts. Rising action. Their success attracts others. More prisoners approach Jake and Valara, asking to join their group. A resistance begins to form, not just fighters, but engineers, hackers, medics, and strategists. They start small, sabotaging syndicate equipment, redistributing food supplies, protecting vulnerable prisoners. Jake teaches them guerrilla tactics from Earth's history, hit and run, asymmetric warfare, and psychological operations. Conflict. Drokath realizes too late that Jake's arena victories were never about glory. They were about buying time and building influence. The syndicate moves to crush the resistance before it grows stronger. They stage a raid on the barracks, arresting dozens including the Quarian engineer who had been secretly building communications equipment. Drokath publicly executes him as a warning, declaring that any further resistance will result in mass reprisals. Character development. The execution shakes the group badly. Many want to back down, to survive rather than resist. Valara stands before them and speaks for the first time as a leader. She tells them about her home world, about how she was judged worthless because she was different. I believed them, she says. I accepted their judgment until a human showed me a different truth, that worth isn't given by others, it's claimed by yourself. We can die on our knees, forgotten, or we can stand and fight for something better. Climax. Jake reveals a plan. They've made contact with an incoming prison transport. Among the new arrivals will be weapons and equipment, smuggled aboard by sympathizers Jake contacted through his arena winnings. But they need a distraction, something big enough to pull all syndicate attention away from the landing bay. Valara volunteers to challenge Drokath to arena combat, invoking an ancient right of honor that even the syndicate must respect. If she wins, the syndicate must grant her group autonomy. If she loses, they disband. Hook. The arena fills to capacity as Valara, a rejected princess thought weak and worthless, faces Drokath, who has killed hundreds in the pit. As she enters, she catches Jake's eye. He nods once, a simple gesture of faith. Valara squares her shoulders, remembering every lesson, every bruise, every moment of training. The human way: adapt, persist, overcome. The bell rings, and she charges forward. Setup. The colony transforms from prison to fortress. Using the engineers' designs and the resistance's combined knowledge, they fortify positions and set traps. Jake organizes the defense with military precision, but everyone knows they're outgunned. When a syndicate warship arrives, they'll face orbital bombardment, professional soldiers, and overwhelming firepower. Their only hope is that friendly forces arrive first, or that they can make the colony too costly to retake. Rising action. The first day brings scattered syndicate counterattacks as remaining enforcers try to retake key positions. Each assault is repelled, but at cost. Valara proves herself not just a fighter, but a leader, inspiring different species to work together despite centuries of prejudice and conflict. She uses her royal education in strategy and diplomacy, while Jake handles tactical combat decisions. They become a formidable command team. Twist. Midway through the second day, a massive ship drops from orbit, but it bears Kael'thar Imperial markings. Valara's blood runs cold. Her people have come, but are they here to help or to silence her embarrassment permanently? An Imperial legate contacts them with a surprising message. Valara's younger brother, Prince Soren, is aboard. He requests to speak with his sister. Character moment. The reunion is tense. Soren reveals that Valara's exile was orchestrated by ambitious court members who feared her different perspective threatened their power. Her mother, the Empress, had been kept ignorant of the harshest conditions of the exile. When Soren learned the truth and where Valara ended up, he convinced their mother to let him investigate. "You were supposed to be in exile, not imprisoned with criminals," Soren says. But he looks at the diverse forces standing with her, at Jake beside her. "Perhaps you found something more valuable than a throne." Complication. Before Valara can respond, the Syndicate warship arrives. The situation becomes a three-way standoff. Syndicate forces want the colony back. The Imperial ship must decide whether to support Valara or remain neutral, and the Resistance must defend their hard-won freedom. The Syndicate captain issues an ultimatum: surrender the colony and its prisoners, or they'll destroy the settlement from orbit. Consequences be damned. Climax. Valara makes a choice that shocks everyone. She broadcasts openly to all three forces, identifying herself and speaking with the authority she was born to, but never truly claimed until now. She declares that Tarthos 9 is no longer a prison or a Syndicate holding, but a free settlement under her protection. She demands the Syndicate withdraw or face Imperial consequences. To the Syndicate captain's mockery, she responds by asking her brother, "Will you stand with me? Not as an Imperial prince making a political calculation, but as my brother. Will you stand for what's right?" Resolution. Soren makes his choice. The Imperial ship moves to support Valara's position, weapons locking onto the Syndicate vessel. Faced with an Imperial warship and an entrenched defense, the Syndicate captain withdraws, vowing this isn't over. As the tension breaks, the settlers, former prisoners, erupt in celebration. Epilogue. Weeks later, Tarthos 9 has transformed again. With Imperial support and the diverse skills of its population, it's becoming a legitimate settlement, a haven for outcasts and refugees. Valara has declined to return to her homeworld, choosing instead to build something new. She stands with Jake overlooking the growing colony. "You know the Syndicate will come back," Jake says, "with more ships, more soldiers, and your brother can't always intervene." "I know," Valara replies. "That's why we need to build something worth defending. And find others like us, the rejected, the forgotten, the different. Together, we're stronger than any empire." Jake smiles. "Very human philosophy, princess." "Former princess," she corrects, then smiles back. "Now I'm just Valara, leader of a colony of impossible people doing impossible things." She extends her hand in the human gesture Jake taught her. "Thank you, Jake Morrison, for showing me that strength isn't about what you're born with. It's about what you choose to become." As they shake hands, both know this is just the beginning. The galaxy is vast, filled with injustice and those who profit from it. But somewhere in the darkness, a light has been lit. A colony where different species stand together, where the rejected find purpose, and where a human's stubborn refusal to accept fate inspired a revolution. The Syndicate won't forget. The Empire will watch with interest. And across the galaxy, others who have been cast aside will hear the story of a rejected alien princess who found hope when a human fighter stood beside her, and together they proved that the greatest strength comes not from power, but from unity. The end.